Hi, everyone who's joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll give it about 60 seconds for all the attendees to trickle in, but we're thrilled that you all are joining us. Glad to have you here for this discussion of Drupal DevOps. So as I said, we'll give it just a minute to let everybody kind of trickle in. We'd love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat, say hello. We're also looking forward to your questions. There's a Q&A feature in Zoom that you can use to ask questions as we go, and we'll save time at the end. And finally, the recording of this webinar will be sent to all of the attendees afterwards. So if you need to go back and review any of the information, you should have that at your fingertips. Okay, so I think we are just about ready to dive in. So welcome. This is the Hitchhiker's Guide to Drupal DevOps. So every team out there does DevOps, whether they know it or not, right? Even if you don't have a formal DevOps process, if you manage deployments, if you have builds, if you do any kind of manual or automated testing or QA, whether you have an integrated platform, you are doing DevOps. But the time spent managing DevOps needs can grow to eclipse the time that your team has available for innovation. So how do we prevent that? How do we implement DevOps tools and processes that are force multipliers for your team instead of chores? So my name is Tim Lennon. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Drupal Association, and I'm thrilled to be joining as the guest moderator for today's panel. The Drupal Association is the 501c3 nonprofit that helps the community build Drupal. We're also hosting DrupalCon. We have DrupalCon Prague coming up in September, and DrupalCon Pittsburgh will be next year in June, I believe. So we hope you'll check that out. We're at drupal.org/association. I'm joined by Paige. Please introduce yourself, Paige.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Taylor. I'm a product marketing manager at Acquia, and I focus on the developer tools. Laurent?
Hello, everyone. My name is Laurent Walker. I'm a VP of Technology at Bounteous within our healthcare division. And if you've probably heard about Bounteous, and if not, what do we do? Simply stated, we help leading companies win digitally by continuously innovating brand experiences that drive transformative results. And as you can see, we have a number of team members spread across, I think, 11 or so locations. And really, we would just work collaboratively to help our clients win. And one of the ways we do that is through our strong partnerships with organizations like Acquia. And this is, I won't walk through all this, but as you can see, we have a strong relationship with Acquia. We're a global partner with over 100 certifications, Partner of the Year in 2019 and 2021. But what's most exciting is talking about the developer experience, about some of the tools that, if you haven't heard of, that Acquia has recently introduced, and just kind of talk shop. This is going to be a lot of fun. So excited to be here.
I think this will be a great conversation. So thank you both. Really appreciate the conversation and what's coming. So everyone, our speakers today, Laurent and Paige, have seen it all. But before we dive into solutions to Drupal DevOps, let's understand the why. Let's understand the problems, some common scenarios, stories that teams face, things that usually indicate a need for an improved DevOps process. And for you in the audience, if these stories sound familiar, or if you have your own stories, success stories or horror stories about DevOps, please feel free to jump in the chat and share those as well. So Paige, maybe you can start off by walking through kind of common pain points on an industry-wide scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we know there are countless challenges that developers have to overcome. Here you can see a list of multiple common struggles, but I'd like to point out a few specific ones for you. So in this Forrester Consulting study, 45% of IT professionals surveyed had difficulty ensuring had difficulty ensuring security across their tool chain. 30% struggled with insufficient skills or expertise to integrate their tools, and 29% had insufficient skills or expertise to maintain their tools. Laurent, is this something that you've also seen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot at Bounteous about the developer experience and, how do we clear the runway to create these environments that, help our developers be most effective and in turn create value for our clients and their customers. I mentioned to the team when we met earlier that I was traveling last week and over the weekend, and we're scrolling Twitter, trying to see, what the kids are talking about, and found this thread, and maybe some of you have shared it, and likely by the end of this, somebody will probably share it in the chat. But it was a thread that talked about developer tech horror stories. And I know that I know I have had some, and I'm sure that as I say that, some of you are thinking, "Oh yes, I remember, I remember that one." I pulled a list together. Let me just grab a couple to kind of share what I'm talking about here. So there's one of the comments in this Twitter thread mentioned a developer team that there was, I don't know if there was conflict, but there was separation between the team that deployed the work, which was an international organization, and a team doing the work. And so the developers would finish coding for the day, put their work on a USB stick, and ship that stick internationally to the team that was receive it, plug it in, and deploy it to their servers. I don't know about you all, but probably feels like as far as developer productivity, that's probably not the best way to manage a release. Lots of stories here about having to, FTP files up to production, not having a process where you can see, did I break something? Is there any code checking? Are there security scanning that needs to happen? The list really goes on, but the common theme here is there's probably a better way to work, a better way to make our teams more efficient, and really as a developer, allow you to focus on just doing what you do best with some automation in place and kind of, smoothing the runway for you.
That's awesome. I just want to interject a second. Someone let me know that the chat was not working for attendees. I think we found a setting that the bit was flipped the wrong way, and people should be able to participate in that chat area now. Double check and say hello over there to let me know it's working. Okay, perfect. Wonderful. So we're all working and going well. And yeah, thank you, Laurent. I think we all have these stories. We all have these like weird ad hoc scenarios where just by pure inertia, the way we do something has just wound up in an unideal way, and we think it's not worth the investment in fixing it up and making a better process. We think we'll skip it and save it for later. But Paige, can you talk about, there's a cost to that?
Right. So how about we talk about what's costing companies $300 billion of developer productivity a year, which is the cost of doing nothing. So by doing nothing, companies are wasting their current resources. They're increasing time to market, and they're exposing themselves to security risks. In our ever-changing business environment, good enough just isn't really good enough anymore. It's time for organizations to drastically innovate their DevOps workflow, or they'll just be left behind. I think it's also important to note that organizations who do innovate with strong developer tools are 65% more innovative than bottom quartile companies. That means that the difference between being first to market is reliant on actually having those strong developer tools. And third, I think it's something we can all agree on as being one of the most important pain points, and that's lost productivity. This also ties into wasting current resources because developers are focusing on maintenance rather than focusing on innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would say, productivity loss it can be a struggle for me and my team as well, right? So my role within the Drupal Association is to help build the tools that help the community build Drupal, right? So we want to empower the community to build a better CMS, to create great projects for great digital experience on the web. But everything we build becomes a service we have to maintain, something we have to update, something we monitor for security. Without kind of the right DevOps processes in place, each innovation adds more technical burden, or put another way, adds technical debt.
And, that's a great point on technical debt, Tim. Every integration or custom solution you build adds technical debt and sort of moves your focus away from innovation and onto maintenance. I just saw the laptop.
It's my marshmallow roasting laptop.
I love it. This really increases time to market. And I know that building future-proof solutions takes a lot of time, careful planning, and significant financial investment. But despite their best intentions, organizations often are forced to cut those corners to meet immediate time and budgetary constraints. This really further increases maintenance load and makes future integrations, like you were saying, Tim, and solutions a lot more complex and often reliant upon legacy technology. As a technology company serving thousands of customers, it's Acquia's focus to provide that highly available, scalable, and future-proof platform that helps relieve the burden of maintenance and reduce technical debt.
And Laron, you have some stories from the trenches when it comes to technical debt and client projects.
Oh, do I have stories? Yeah, definitely have a couple examples, but even as we're talking, it just reminded me that we talked a lot about innovation and being able to work efficiently and being able to pivot. And I think we've all seen, through COVID that, maybe our workplaces changed, the way we were working changed. We were all in office sitting kind of side by side at one point, and now we've, been behind monitors and Zoom for 2 years. And if you didn't have the right infrastructure in place, that can be devastating on productivity. Or if you need to roll out new features because all of a sudden people aren't physically coming to your location to make purchases or however they interact with you, what do you do? And really, what we're talking about today will help you get ahead of all these potential problems. Couple of stories, and I won't mention names. And even if you ask me in the chat, trying to keep my job, so let's keep it let's keep it highbrow. We recently worked with an organization that, like many of you, were trying to upgrade to the latest version of Drupal, getting ready for Drupal 10, and taking a look at the code base. They said, "Hey, the people who originally built this are no longer here. Bounteous, can you, kind of help us right size this and take a look and help us get there?" And so, we pulled down everything, and we were starting to take a look and realized very quickly, they had source control. We had access to their Git account, their GitHub account. But that was about it. And so, as far as trying to make remediations and looking for deprecations and trying to add back to the platform as other teams are still working on features, it was this, this tricky balance of, making sure that we don't step on each other's toes. And fortunately, we had really smart people on it. The client was super communicative. So, collaboratively, we were able to work together. But I think some of that back and forth that happened and a lot of the slow starts, to be truthful, were a result of just not having a proper build system in place, not having a proper workflow and process in place, or more accurately, an efficient kind of system in place. And it's easy as the consultant to sit here and say, we know everything. It's always the client's problem that we're fixing. There's always somebody coming to us to help us to tap into our expertise and figure out what they need to move forward. But let's tell a story about old Laron here.
Yeah, it seems like you got something close to home.
Little back in the day story. So I won't say where I worked, so it wasn't Bounteous. We'll just say that. But had a ticket to work on a new feature. Again, very basic system in place. We had source control, but that was about it. And I remember taking a look and pulling up a piece of code and saying, like, this is atrocious. Like, I'm not one to speak ill of someone else's work, but could be better, not very good. Let me go in and fix this. And I remember sitting on my high horse thinking about, with all my experience and knowledge, let me get in there and let me fix this. Let me show them how it's really supposed to go. Only to find out that when you run a little git blame, the person who added said feature about a year ago, that month was yours truly.
The call was coming from inside the house. You did it.
Tell you what, I know they talk about taking a slice of humble pie. I think that day I just had the whole, the entire pie, the whole thing. Yeah. But the lesson I learned there is, even as we try to bring on people who are maybe newer in their career, or you're bringing teams that work differently at other organizations, and now you're trying to, figure out your way of working here, the tooling can really help that conversation. And the tools aren't a silver bullet. It's not a cure-all, but it can really help facilitate some great practices and do take care of a lot of the low-hanging fruit.
So I think we've established, the cost of not managing your DevOps needs, right? It leads to innovation grinding to a halt. Your time is spent manually handling what should be automated, dealing with this sort of rickety contraption with bubblegum and baling wire. But of course, knowing you have a problem is only half the battle. It's only kind of the start. And there are some struggles and pitfalls with trying to dig yourself out, trying to figure out what you need to solve the problem. So can you kind of give the recipe for figuring out where you go next, Laron?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned the phrase silver bullet. And I think it's easy to, look at 1,000-foot view and say, well, if only we had this. This isn't tech related, but I play a little guitar, and I get into the problem or have the issue of every time I see something new or a new piece of gear, I'm like, well, if only I had that, then I could play like my favorite artist. And technology is kind of similar, where you look at the landscape, you look at all the tools available to you, and you look at the marketing page that promises it's going to, put you to bed at night and tuck you in and feed you cookies. I'm a fan of the feed you cookies part personally.
Yeah, for some reason it never works. I've got all the apps and but
exactly. Spoiler, it never works the way it's advertised. So what do you do, to get back to your question, Tim? Find the right solution for your organization, for your team, for where you are right now. So at Bounty's, we talk a lot about the digital maturity and it being a spectrum. And depending on where you are on that spectrum, the solution way over here may not be the right fit for your team. I was mentioning to Paige and Tim earlier that one of the things I also like to do is go to those sites that talk about the infrastructure and the tech stacks of really big organizations. I mean, like the Netflixes of the world, and they have these really, really cool things, and they're working with the latest tech, and everything's on Kubernetes, and they're doing all this really neat stuff and have these great workflows. And then, the foolish thing would be to look at that chart, look at all those tools and say, all right, team of two.
Yeah, exactly.
Here it is. I have the answer. This is what we need to do. And, unfortunately, we get so excited, or at least I do, at times. We'll keep it to me because I'm sure none of you do this. You see all the solutions out there, you get excited about them, but you don't pick the right one for your organization. So take the time, slow down, figure out what are our needs today. If we have aspirations, things we're going to grow into, great. The tools can evolve, the tools can change, but you don't want to shoot yourselves in the foot by jumping too far in the deep end and not picking a solution that fits where you are kind of on that digital maturity spectrum.
Awesome. And, Paige, I feel like you can kind of tie this back into that Forrester report from the beginning, really, that whole success story.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking back to the Forrester Consulting report, when asked in a different slide that we didn't show here, but when asked, which of the following benefits do you anticipate realizing or have you already realized from new out-of-the-box toolchain management systems, 46% of IT professionals had improved quality. And 40% had improved developer productivity. So it's great to see that, companies are able to find what works best for them. But as, Laron said, there is no silver bullet.
Yeah. So, okay. We understand that there's a landscape of tools. We have the cautionary tale to right size your solution to the size of team and the needs of your team, right? Of these variety of things, we've split them into these 5 categories, right? You need the tools that support your planning, tools that support your build and dev environments, your testing, your reviewing, your sort of deploy tool chain. And you can sort of individually mix and match all these sort of tools. That's certainly one option based on finding what meets you. And many of these have integrations with each other. Some of them don't. I mean, Laron, you even mentioned even within a single suite, sometimes you use tools in kind of slightly different ways or use them together. You mentioned the Atlassian suite, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably not a surprise when organizations work with a company like Bounty's. We have our preferences. We have the tools that we've invested in for our developers. One of them is the Atlassian suite, and we'll get back to that in a second. But the reality is, sometimes we're brought in a situation, or many times we're brought in situations where companies are saying, "This is what we have. We need you to use this," and we'll put the realism glasses on for a second, and sometimes even just getting access can take a long time, which is why we have sprint zeros, and we try to adjust the timeline for said conversations. But we're not getting too far down that path. The Atlassian suite, there are a lot of ways that you can use Jira and Confluence, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it's maybe the obvious thing would be if I am or you have a product owner that's writing tickets and they're assigning them out to developers, that Jira is a silver bullet. That's all you need to do. And we found that more information is better. The more we can communicate, the more we can set up these projects and these tickets in a way that they can be picked up if people are joining the project later, or if we're picking something up after months and months and months of not working on it, and have a good sense of what's going on, even though the project team has changed, the better off we are. And often we're finding that it's not just the ticketing and assigning tickets in Jira that's the answer, but it's also linking those tickets to Confluence, where you can go into more detail, you can add imagery, you can add links out to other examples. Not that you can't do that, within Jira commenting and all that, but feel liberated to use the tools that you have in front of you differently to fit your organization so that, again, you're optimizing for productivity, you're optimizing for efficiency, you're trying to break down the silos and make sure that there's clear communication across your teams.
And Laron, I think another way you put it before is that, right, it's clearing the runway so that the people can focus on the work, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, knowing 5 stages of kind of DevOps tool chain that might be important to you, you could look at the big Netflix example if you happen to be a multi-billion-dollar streaming company, but you can also look at, there's a variety of like industry thought leaders, blogs out there that have example stacks that combine some of these different options that we see here in a variety of different ways. But, you know, let's say, good, I'm convinced, right? Like I don't want to spend the time troubleshooting tools, manually tracking down Git branches, figuring out how we're starting the tests. I want to work on my coding, or I want my team to do that. But if I'm a tech lead or the engineering manager for a team, you know, how do I convince the finance department that this is something we need to invest in, right? This seems like added cost on top of the same projects that we're already doing. In particular, how do I prove the case that this is actually going to save us time and save us money? So yeah, can we talk about finding the budget? What's your experience, Laron?
Yeah, sure. It's if you can tell already by the 20 or so minutes we've been talking, it's easy to get me excited. And
very true, very true.
Yes. The danger with that, and you probably see where I'm going with this, is as new things come out, as you see new tools, as you learn about things, as you're talking to others in the community on Slack and Twitter or reading Hacker News, you can see like the latest hotness and go, ooh, look at that. That seems cool. The reality is, though, the teams that are defining these budgets that are, you know, ultimately investing or at least approving these purchases, they don't react so well to this is cool, you know. Small story, there's a developer that is brilliant that works here at Bounteous and is part of our innovation team, where we're looking at kind of next gen technology and some proof of concept work that, you know, hopefully excites our clients and gets us, you know, kind of on the forefront of what's happening in tech, doing really, really great work there. And probably weekly I get a Slack from him that says, hey, have you seen this? Hey, check this out. Ooh, we need to do this. Not saying that we need to change our entire process for every project, but highlighting that there's a new thing that I want to make you aware of and Bounteous should be aware of. That doesn't work very well with decision makers. So let's take a step back. Let's look at what's needed again for your organization based on where you are on that landscape of digital maturity. If you're a team of 2 or 3, let's pick the solution that fits the way your team works. If you're maybe a team that's growing and you went from, we all sat in one office and now we have multiple offices, or we're distributed globally, and we need to have better checks and balances in place because the way we used to work just doesn't work today. Like, take that into consideration as you're planning. We didn't talk about this earlier, but you know, the truth is a lot of these tools, they have demos, they have trials, they have developer relations teams that will like walk you through the products and help you make a case. And even going back to the charts that you were showing, Paige, earlier, those Forrester studies, like come back with data and show, you know, here is the value that we see in going with these tools. Here is the danger based on research and based on facts and based on numbers and figures of us not taking advantage of the solutions that are out there and improving our workflow. And then also for the organization, you can take that data and make the real case for what we do. This is the winning formula. This is why we need this. This is why it's worth the investment. And, you know, for some in this maybe, we'll get your landing pages up faster and that's it. For others, it's probably a bigger conversation, but you want to think through the lens of, you know, dollars and cents and data.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say, I think about it sometimes as the ratio of like support infrastructure to productivity, like the ratio of how much support you need toward the output you can get, whether it's client work, whether it's an innovative new feature, whether it's something else like that, right? The tools make that ratio, well, depending on which way you're thinking about it, make that ratio smaller. There's less support effort. There's less manual intervention from a suite of project managers or manual QA testing team per unit innovation, per unit client delivery.
There's a project we worked on recently, and we were, again, I'm being so good not to name names, but another big brand, one that you've probably all heard of, and our team was, you know, helping them with some new features for some of their products. And they had a system set up, they had a workflow in place, but then the build would just break. And
Mm.
so what would happen is we'd have our developers at the ready to dive in and do their work. And we're like, well, we got to wait for, we'll call him Tom, to jump on, very close to Tim. It wasn't Tim.
Well, I'm
Tom
sure I've done worse. So
that's right. He's going to fix the build because he put it together. So like, even with all the tooling,
the keepers of hidden knowledge, right? That's one of the other things when you don't standardize is you wind up with that. So the point is you need this unified front of all the value proposition going into it. And Paige, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier, but
No worries. As you were just saying, like, that united front is really important because it really does allow all of the voices to be heard during the discovery, implementation, and maintenance period. And I think that sometimes the developer voice can be lost during the beginnings of those conversations when it's most important. Understanding that developer value is really key to be successful in our technology-driven world now.
Absolutely. So, Paige and Lerone have painted a pretty vivid picture for us of how every engineering team has DevOps requirements, whether or not they've been thoughtfully created or have just evolved ad hoc. We've seen a picture of those costs and productivity, stability, innovation, pitfalls to avoid when you're setting out to evaluate tools, or the scale of the tools you need, no Netflix for two-person teams kind of stuff, right? But let's look at solutions. Let's look at some specific solutions. And Lerone, why don't you walk us through some of this landscape?
Yeah, so there's a mix here that you'll see here on the screen. And again, one of the things that I need a thesaurus to find a different word than exciting, but one of the things that draws me to what we do with tech is that it's ever changing. There's so many solutions out there. It's hard to be bored doing what we do. But the reality is we still need to pick the best tool for the job. So like, even when you're just looking at planning and management, we talked a little bit about the Atlassian suite of tools with Jira and Confluence and Bamboo and all that. But I've been in Atlassian on Monday, and we've had clients that have worked in tools like Monday.com, which is from maybe a features and functionality standpoint, a little stripped down, maybe more focused towards the marketing team. But there are groups that, that's all they use for their, all their communication for assigning tickets and planning and road mapping and all that. And some of you may have heard of tools like Reich, which includes some time tracking, and more on the enterprise side of the scale is Azure DevOps, which offers some similar functionality to what you've seen in the Atlassian suite. And as you get deeper into maybe some of the actual tooling that handles the CI/CD part of things, some of our more, we'll say, seasoned folks on the call may be Team Jenkins.
Yeah, you know what? It's a little creaky, but it's been around a long time. We know it works.
No, it works. Old faithful,
Yep.
It's like the 90s Honda Civic that's in a garage with 300,000 miles. It just keeps going.
Got 300,000 more in it. So.
That's right. But even, the thing that's cool about, we'll keep it on track here. I know that we've used Team City. Bamboo is the process that you can run kind of in the Atlassian suite to do some of what we're talking about here. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but if you're strong GitHub users, check out GitHub Actions. Acquia has their pipelines feature. Like, again, the landscape is huge. And it's not a matter of, I heard Lerone say this name on the webinar, so that's the tool we need. It's really about just having an idea of like, what is even available to us and how do we pick the right solution for our organization. Small plug, I noticed that one of our folks from that is one of our directors from our QA team is here in the chat, or is one of the attendees. And, one of the things we can do as developers to be nice to our QA teams is think about how do we make sure that we're integrating the right tests as part of this process. There are even like visual regression tools that you can add as part of the pipeline for accessibility. I believe like Pally has a CLI tool, PALLY, as accessibility with the ALOI. They have a tool that you can run as part of your job. So as you're working, these checks are happening automatically. Not a silver bullet, not going to fix everything and find everything. But again, we want to focus on a higher level thinking. Like, what are the things that we can, how can we leverage the tools in front of us to make us better, to reduce the number of bugs that QA is kicking back or having to open, and ultimately reducing defects that roll into production. The landscape is vast.
Yeah. So, we've got Yeah, so we've got some great questions coming in actually related to Jenkins in particular, and transition to new DevOps and build tools. I'm going to be thrilled to talk about that in our QA portion in just a second. But I think one of the things that people are wondering, I'm sure, as they're listening to this is, well, great, you've told us there's so many options, there's so many good tools, but like, I kind of just want to get on with it. I just want to solve this problem of my team's time getting like slowly chipped away, slowly turning from development to ops as they try and keep their contraption up. Is there kind of a comprehensive solution that we can implement to kind of take a lot of this work out for us? And Paige, that's where you have a solution.
Yes, I do have that solution. So let's talk Acquia DevTools. If you could go to the next slide, thank you. So think back to those common struggles that we touched on earlier. So the struggles with integrating, with maintaining, and automating your toolkits. Acquia eliminates those DevOps silos and drastically decreases effort to maintain the tool chain. We do it by providing all of the tools needed to successfully develop. In partnership with GitLab, Acquia unifies every step of the developer lifecycle, and it's all optimized specifically for Drupal. Go to the next slide.
I think that's awesome, in particular because GitLab itself is underneath the hood open source. So as the representative here from the Drupal Association itself and the Drupal project, and as someone who partners as well with GitLab, we've actually had features contributed back upstream to them as well. It's nice that we're collectively working not only on a robust tool and integrating it, but on one that we as a community can participate in the improvement of.
Exactly. I mean, imagine taking a junior developer and making them as productive as 2 senior developers. Our partnership with GitLab actually brought us Code Studio, which provides the tools to plan, build, review, test, deploy, and measure. Acquia owns and automates the repetitive parts so that users can stay focused on what's most valuable for their lifecycle. It truly is a very holistic developer experience that is Drupal optimized and maintained by a single platform powered by Code Studio. Lerone, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have experience with Code Studio, correct?
You are absolutely correct. One of the neat things about our partnership with Acquia is they bring us into these conversations. We get to try a lot of the beta tools before they're out for a general release, which is some may say exciting, but because I'm trying to be elevated here, not say exciting for the 300th time in this webinar.
I was going to say, we got to have a counter for you or something.
If this were a drinking game, you would all be in trouble. But one of the things that's really neat is I think that the developers in the call could probably agree that we have strong opinions. And so, when Acquia, just being, have my truth glasses on now, when Acquia approached us and said, hey, we have this tool, we wanted you to check it out. It's, all you need is a laptop and the whole full development lifecycle can, kind of happen in your browser. We're like, okay. And so they gave us access to the beta. We got to kick the tires. And I remember, one of our principal architects was on the call with us. And the first thing he said was, oh, this is GitLab. And immediately, there was a trust there because, you, instead of building this proprietary system in a black box that no one had ever heard of before. And we're talking about finding investment, trying to convince decision makers that, yes, this new tool that's not really proven is supposed to solve all our problems. We can now point to all these other scenarios where this is something that's familiar. It's open source. The community is already aware of what this is. It's a known quantity. And you've built that on top of the Acquia stack, which is already part of the tooling that we're using anyway. And so it's been a great marriage because you have this all-in-one kind of ecosystem where you can do your planning, you can do all your messaging and ticketing, you can use Cloud IDE and all the hooks are there, so you can develop, there in a browser. You can deploy all the way from, your, I was gonna say local, but really it's your cloud environment all the way through production. And there's, code checking and security scanning and syntax checking and deprecation checking, and it can handle, well, I know, I don't even have the product list in front of me. This is,
just off the top of the head.
It's all the pie I had earlier. I think it's all the sugar, kind of rushing through my head.
Good.
But really the main point is you can do all this kind of in one platform. And if CI/CD is new to you, you don't have to figure this all out from scratch. A lot of these hooks for Drupal are set up out of the box, but you can also customize it, which is really, really powerful. Going back to that digital maturity scale, if you're right here in the beginning and this is something that's brand new for you, you can start there and you go all the way through production. But if you know exactly what you want, you can still take those defaults and customize them to your liking. Really, really powerful.
Well, thank you for that synopsis on Code Studio and the power of Acquia.
Long synopsis page, I know that.
Well, it's fine. We love it. Getting back to the rest of the Acquia developer suite, I know Lauren's touched on it, but I do want to touch on Acquia Cloud IDE. So it really does provide a place to write code, but it's as a service. So you don't need a local machine. You write everything in the cloud. So with only your browser, you'll have an IDE at your fingertips within minutes. And our latest and greatest productized feature, Cloud Actions, it performs common DevOps tasks during deployments automatically from Cloud Platform UI with Acquia best practice built in. Go to the next slide. Thank you. The value of Acquia developer products brings to any DevOps workflow is unmatched. Our suite of developer products really enable you to eliminate those silos I was mentioning earlier and create that holistic DevOps workflow from end to end. With Acquia, users can get to market faster with efficient and streamlined processes for each step of the SDLC. They'll eliminate risk with security testing and governance features, and they'll improve code quality with a full testing suite optimized by Drupal experts, with, again, all of it including best practices. But the best part about everything is that it's all integrated with Acquia Cloud Platform, so you can start using it today with your Acquia hosted Drupal applications. Now back to you, Tim, for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And we've got some great questions that came in the chat. Getting a little technical in a couple places, some questions about the Acquia platform itself and combinations with on-premise features. First question that came in from David was, how do you integrate sort of Drush and Composer handling that are now part of sort of modern Drupal development into this combination of the DevOps stack? Like, where's the place where you're running your Composer requires committing artifacts, that sort of a thing? Laron, maybe you want to speak to this a little bit, and I could talk about it somewhat as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the answer really is, it depends. So it depends on what the setup is, what your front end looks like. We have worked on projects where we're doing a lot. There's almost like two processes. There's the one that we're running in the Atlassian suite where things are kind of happening locally, and then we kind of deploy something over, kind of over the wall. And then other tests and other checks are happening, kind of when that deployment happens on the client side. If you're going back to the Acquia example, they have a lot of the hooks already set up for if you're hosting on Acquia, where you're really just pointing to your repo, and the Code Studio, making sure I'm getting my terms right, is looking at what your code base is. You can make the connections, and then you can kind of point to what you need to have happen. So if your front end has very specific tasks that need to be run, you can have all those tasks kind of happen. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but there's a question about kind of cloud actions and how that differs from like cloud hooks and some of these other things. Kind of within, and this is getting more Acquia specific, kind of within that Acquia ecosystem, you can decide, hey, when I'm deploying code, like I want it first to do A, B, C, D, clear my cache, rebuild the theme, like kind of go through all these steps. And you can kind of step by step go through them out of the box. It's also possible to do that manually, sorry, Acquia, kind of without Acquia if you have the right setup.
Laron.
This fair and balanced.
No, very true. It's true. It's true. It's true.
And I would say, speaking to my experience with sort of the Drush and Composer side of things, and in particular with helping a lot of the community make the transition over the course of, it's 6 years now since Drupal moved to a Composer-based workflow back in Drupal 8. That a lot of folks are integrating it into the classic dev stage prod pipeline. In many cases, whether it's within GitHub Actions, GitLab pipelines, even Jenkins jobs, things like that, what folks tend to be doing is building a pipeline process that will run your standard set of Composer dependency commands. In some cases, we will have folks who will set up one of these pipelines to try a regular Composer update to sort of pre-stage possible security updates and dependencies, or version updates, and they'll pin those dependencies based on whether they're willing to do, only patch level, minor level, that sort of stuff in their Composer workflow. And so that pipeline or GitHub action or whatever it is going to output you sort of, you'll have your traditional staging environment, which is like, here's your staged code, your upcoming innovation changes, your upcoming feature changes, but you'll also have, here's your upcoming dependency update environment and things that are changed there so that you can run the same validation against that. So a pipeline will build that environment. Maybe you'll have a CI suite that'll run some tests against that to just validate, okay, we're all good with our upcoming dependencies. We're also all good with our features. So in that sort of parallel stage environment, you can then go to here's a prod ready, integrating any potential Composer updates and our upcoming feature list. So that's sort of one area, but I certainly would say that it's in that pipelines actions kind of space where you're usually going to be doing that. And one more tip on the Composer front or the Drush front potentially as well. Anywhere that you're interacting with external assets. So let's say you need patch files, right, that you're managing as part of, right? How do you manage all the patch files in your DevOps process, especially if you need to apply them, with Composer? Composer patches is a little complicated. Keep those assets in a local repository, like a patches repository, and commit them, and then have your pipelines and things reference that. And I say that only because you absolutely can, from a technical point of view, hot link to those patches on Drupal.org or wherever else they live. But right then you have a build chain dependency on the internet, on the network being live, on Drupal.org being up, and the potential risk of somehow that patch file being changed without you realizing it, right? So, within these pipelines as well, especially things like when you're doing the Composer patches commands or things like that, stash those kinds of things locally.
So one word, I don't think we mentioned this conversation, and I know maybe it feels old school. Sorry, sure, my age here, but we've written and spoken a bit about Acquia BLT, build launch tool, and hearing the name, it may feel like, well, I need to be an Acquia customer to use it, but the reality is you can pull it down right from GitHub.
Open source and available.
It's open source. It's available. If this is new to you and you're just like, I just want to kick the tires, and I have the pieces and I want to understand, like, for myself how this works. I don't want it pre-configured. I don't want it kind of out of the box. I just want to conceptually understand how these pieces fit together. There's some great documentation there, and I think even in the last week or so, Bounteous has posted an article that goes into more detail about setting that up. So
yeah. So we have a question here from Shalane. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. About transitioning from actually something super familiar to me, from a combination Bitbucket and Jenkins environment to a GitLab environment, and in particular to a GitLab on-prem environment. So this is actually almost identical to what the Drupal Association is actually currently going through, right? So we have also adopted GitLab for the Drupal community, the open source edition in partnership with them. And previously we have been using, in particular, Bitbucket and Jenkins for our own sort of orchestration and pipelines. So we're actually going through kind of the same situation. And I wouldn't mind answering questions offline as well if you wanted to send them. But we're doing a few different things. Truth be told, we talk a lot about process automation. One of the few areas where there isn't much process automation is the process of switching from one automation tool to another one. But more or less what we're doing is we're bucketing, like conceptually bucketing the categories of Jenkins pipelines that we have, right? So things related to managing development environments to our team, things related to production deployments, things related to queuing non-Drupal related parts of our infrastructure. Sort of, we're first just kind of organizing what we already have, and then kind of knocking those things off the list. So we will, in our case, we might change actually within the existing Jenkins job, keep it in Jenkins at first, but change first which repository it's pointing to, all right? Get it off the Bitbucket side, get it pointing over to the new GitLab location where we've migrated the repository. And then from there, we will effectively just rebuild the job as a pipeline, which, like, it's like learning a different dialect. It's not really a whole new language. It's relatively similar, these orchestration features. And we're just going kind of job by job within these categories. So that's mostly a process answer. I would say the most painful part is actually deciding when to do it, right? Because you don't, when you have a good workflow, you do know you want to migrate tools, but you have a good workflow, you kind of don't want to take the process downtime. So part of it is also seeing if we can align it to, okay, maybe we're doing some other maintenance related to our dev servers anyway. So it's okay if those pipelines are down for a little bit. So I hope that's helpful. It's just kind of some general feedback. And yeah, the on-premise need, Shalane, I'm not sure about this question, but I think this question was related to the Acquia Cloud kind of suite solutions and whether that can also help you if you have like locked down on-premise infrastructure that you also have to deploy to. I wouldn't personally know the answer, and I'm not sure if Paige would have the answer offline. I am reasonably sure that there are ways to sort of mirror a pipeline or actions process. I'm just thinking it in GitLab terms, but I think the Acquia suite probably has similar capability so that you can actually trigger from the cloud level deployment, you can kick off a parallel process in an on-prem or vice versa, depending on which deploys first. I would think that would be achievable, but.
And now that you asked, and I'm sorry, whoever scrolling through made that. Shalene, was that your question? Shalane rather. Perfect. Yep. So, yeah. One of the questions that our team asked immediately is when you look at the Code Studio offering and Cloud IDE, I mean, we are actively using Cloud IDE, and we've had the chance to kind of kick the tires there too, but. What if you have scenarios where it's like, hey, I love my IDE. I don't want to develop in the cloud. I see all the features. I love the idea of being able to edit and work in my browser, but I
love my PHP Storm or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I already have my configuration set up the way I want. You're not locked in a cloud IDE. That's an option to get running quickly, but you can also use your own local tooling as well. So.
And it's interesting. We've been seeing those equivalents in, again, just tying it back to the Drupal community, right? Again, we're building infrastructure on GitLab plus some of our own kind of custom tools and seeing the community do some cool things where, again, doing some web IDE type work, doing things like integrating with Gitpod as another kind of IDE and spin up tool, but also, yeah, continuing to use PHP Storm if that's what they're used to, VS Code, or if they're, text editor in the command line, there's definitely still those hardcore folks out there. So, yeah, and one of the really nice things about all of this landscape is, and I think this is just true even for Acquia, which provides the comprehensive solution, is comprehensive doesn't mean you have to use every piece. It means you can pick and choose the things that fit properly into your workflow. Awesome. Well, I think that was all of our questions, and thank you very much for the engagement in chat, everyone. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate kind of understanding where you are and kind of what the scope of your needs are. It helps us figure out the content for the next time around, what we might want to focus on some more. So we really appreciate it. I hope you'll join me in thanking Paige and Lerone for sharing their expertise, giving not only a comprehensive overview of this landscape, but offering some concrete solutions. And again, I want to thank you all as the attendees and listeners for your time and the questions. As I said earlier, a recording is going to get sent out to all the registered attendees, get made available on acquia.com. And if you want to learn more, you can certainly reach out to the Acquia team about their suite of projects. I'm sure you can reach out to Bounteous about the projects if you're interested or have a similar project of that kind. And if you're curious more about the Drupal Association and how you can support the community, you can reach out to the association at drupal.org/association as well. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll leave you to the rest of your afternoon. Cheers.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Eat some pie.